Topic 7. Participants in international relations. The purpose of the seminar, to get acquainted with the content of the concepts of subject, agent, actor, participant in international relations, to identify the relationship and interrelation of the main participants in international relations. The main provisions of the 1. In international political science, as in other social disciplines, there are several terms for the actors studied by it. In terms of its content, the broadest of these terms is the concept of subject, an individual, group, class, community of people interacting with each other about or with the help of an object. One of the main criteria for selecting a subject is its endowment with consciousness and the ability to act. 2. Which of the varieties of social communities that interact on the world stage can be considered typical international actors, or in other words, which of them can be considered as the most influential, authoritative and promising? Both of these issues are, although to varying degrees, the subject of scientific discussions, theoretical disputes. 3. These examples indicate the agreement of scientists on the main types of international actors, states and interstate, intergovernmental organizations. As for the question of other participants in international relations, it remains the subject of theoretical differences. However, much more serious discussions are being held on the question of which type of actor should be preferred in the analysis of international participants in international relations. The purpose of the seminar, to get acquainted with the content of the concepts of subject, agent, actor, participant in international relations, to identify the relationship and interrelation of the main participants in international relations. The main provisions of the 1. In international political science, as in other social disciplines, there are several terms for the actors studied by it. In terms of its content, the broadest of these terms is the concept of subject, an individual, group, class, community of people interacting with each other about or with the help of an object. One of the main criteria for selecting a subject is its endowment with consciousness and the ability to act. 2. Which of the varieties of social communities that interact on the world stage can be considered typical international actors, or in other words, which of them can be considered as the most influential, authoritative and promising? Both of these issues are, although to varying degrees, the subject of scientific discussions, theoretical disputes. 3. These examples indicate the agreement of scientists on the main types of international actors, states and interstate, intergovernmental organizations. As for the question of other participants in international relations, it remains the subject of theoretical differences. However, much more serious discussions are being held on the question of which type of actor should be preferred in the analysis of international relations. 4. The state is undoubtedly an international actor that meets all the above-mentioned criteria of this concept. It is the main subject of international law. The foreign policy of states largely determines the nature of the international relations of the era. It has an impact on the degree of freedom and the level of well-being of the individual, on human life itself. The activities and even the existence of international organizations and other participants in international relations largely depend on how states treat them. In addition, the state is a universal form of political organization of human communities. At present, almost all of humanity, with a few exceptions, is united in states. But the process of forming new states continues. If in the 18th century there were 5-6 states in the world, then in 1900 there were already 30 of them. In 1945 60 states were members of the Union, in 1965 it already consists of 100, in 1990, 160, in 2006, 192, and in 2011, 193 states. In order to become a member of the United Nations and consequently, to be recognized as a subject of international law, a state must have an independent government, territory. States differ in many parameters, including political influence, military power, economic potential, territory, etc. It is obvious that many of these parameters are interrelated. During the Cold War, it was common to single out superpowers, the USA, the United States, large states, France, Canada, etc., and small ones, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein. After the end of the Cold War, this classification began to lose its meaning. The economic factor is becoming increasingly important. 6. The development of the world political system of the late early Icoxy century has seriously challenged the basic attribute of the state as the main participant in international interaction, state sovereignty. What has seemed immutable for centuries is changing. In the modern world, states are increasingly forced to take into account, on the one hand, international organizations and institutions. As a result, there is a restriction of sovereignty from above, on the other, with their own intrastate regions, which actively enter the international arena, developing trade, cultural and other relations, restriction of sovereignty from below. In addition, states are forced to take into account the interests of other participants in international political relations, transnational corporations, non-governmental organizations, etc. 7. Non-state actors in international relations include intergovernmental organizations, IGOs, non-governmental organizations, MNOs, transnational corporations, CNEs, and other social forces and movements operating on the world stage. The growth of their role and influence is a relatively new phenomenon in international relations, which is still poorly studied and is characteristic of the post-war period. This is partly due to the lack of clarity of their true meaning reflected in terms such as invisible continent, Gal Tan, or Second World. These features fully apply to international intergovernmental organizations, IGOs, which are stable associations of states based on international treaties, with a certain agreed competence and permanent bodies. The creation of the first intergovernmental organization, the Permanent Commission for the Navigation of the Rhine, is associated with the end of the Congress of Vienna in 1815. By the end of the century, there were already more than a dozen such organizations in the world. 9. There are different typologies of MPOs, although many scholars admit that none of them can be considered perfect, they all help to systematize knowledge about this relatively new influential international actor. The most common is the classification of IGOs according to the geopolitical criterion and in accordance with the scope and focus of their activities. In the first case, there are such types of intergovernmental organizations as universal, for example, the Union or the League of Nations, interregional, for example, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, regional e.g., Latin American Economic System, subregional e.g., Benelux. According to the second criterion, there are general purpose, Union economic, EFTA military political, NATO, financial, IMF, World Bank, scientific, Eureka technical, International Telecommunications Union, or even more highly specialized IGOs, International Bureau of Weights and Measures. 10. Unlike intergovernmental organizations, MNOs are generally non-territorial entities because their members are not sovereign states. They meet three criteria: the international nature of the membership and objectives, private foundations, voluntary activities. That is why they are classified as new actors. M. K. Smuts, actors outside sovereignty. J. Rosna, transnational forces. M. Merle, transnational organizations. 11. S. MPOs differ in their size, structure, focus and objectives. However, they all have common features that distinguish them from both states and intergovernmental organizations. Unlike the former, they cannot be represented as actors acting, in the words of G. Morgenthau, in the name of interest expressed in terms of power. Unlike the latter, their founders are not states, but professional, religious or private organizations, institutions, and in addition, their decisions, as a rule, do not have legal force for the state. Yet they are increasingly able to achieve the goals they set for themselves not only professionally, but also politically. This also applies to tasks that require serious concessions on the part of states that are forced in some cases to compromise the sacred principle of national sovereignty. 12. Significant participant of international cooperation, transnational corporations, CNEs. CNEs are business entities whose activities are largely spread over several countries. Unlike international organizations, CNEs are working with the purpose of attraction of profit. At the same time, the activities of even those that have national specifics may contradict national interests. According to union estimates, at the end of the 20th century, there were more than transnational corporations in the world. About 90% of all CNEs are based in the developed countries of the Northern Hemisphere. In the mid-1990s, more than 12 million people worked for hundreds of the world's leading CNEs alone. According to American researchers J. T. Rourke and Master of Arts Boyer, one of the largest multinational corporations, General Motors, in 1998 produced products worth $161.3 billion, which is more than the gross national product of a number of countries. For a comparison, the GDP of Greece was 137.4, Israel -96.7, Ireland -59.9, Slovenia -19.5, Nicaragua -9.3. At the same time as other participants, internal regions, administrative territorial entities of the state, cantons, federal lands, states, etc., take independent steps on the world stage. From a legal point of view, they cannot conduct independent foreign policy activities, although they maintain external relations in the field of culture, trade, science, etc. 14. Thus, one of the stable trends in international relations,
the existence of which, as well as the existence of the trend of increasing interdependence, is now recognized by all theoretical directions of international political science, is the growth of the number and diversity of social actors, either directly involved in their functioning, or having a significant impact on their state.
This applies to traditional international actor states and interstate institutions, and even more so to relatively new actors such as transnational corporations, non-governmental organizations, associations of various kinds, stable groups, up to mafia structures and prominent personalities. But perhaps even more impressive are the changes that various temporary associations and unorganized individuals are making to the nature and state of international relations today. Confusion, lack of coordination and subordination of actions even within the framework of one actor, state, another phenomenon of the modern world. Examples can be given where the authorities did not control their armed units.